Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani with another edition of Common Sense. This subject is sorely in need of the application of common sense, really because it's so important to our country. Not for the reasons it's probably being covered, but for reasons having to do with the national security of the United States. How we handle top secret documents, particularly those that should be top secret documents, is crucial. It's not an exaggeration to say it could jeopardize our survival in the kind of world that we live in. I mean, this is the way in which the Cold War became a 4 or 5 decade massive problem for the world that caused the death of millions of people, because spying and infiltration of the United States gave Russia the nuclear weapons at a much earlier stage than they ever otherwise would have gotten it. And they spied on the United States. The United States had too many communists within its government. And Stalin, one of the most vicious killers in the history of the world, easily the equal of Hitler, was able to get a weapon that could destroy the world. And that never would have happened. It would have taken 10 to 20 years for Russia to develop that. They were impoverished. Well, that's how important top secret information is. Now, most of it isn't that important, but you never know which is and which isn't. So I speak to you from experience. I've had a good deal of experience dealing with top secret information. Most of you probably know me for being a criminal prosecutor, but I spent 4.5 years of my life in the Justice Department during the Cold War. And I was one of the people that helped develop the FISA court and spent a great deal of time reviewing the very sensitive warrants that were needed then for surveillance of communist spies, Russian spies in particular. So I have a great deal of knowledge of how to deal with very sensitive information. I remember the rules that I were taught. I remember them and could repeat them, repeat the 5 things you have to do with sensitive information every night. You got to check them off every single night, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can tell you what you have to do when you leave so you don't make a mistake. Literally, you go through a debriefing. So it is very hard to watch this. I will say, as we get into it, that there is one thing that makes this, that has to be said to put it in context. Over the years, we have come to over-classify. I have seen documents declassified as top secret, never should have been top secret in the first place. Now, that's a terrible thing because most of these people are intelligent people. And if they see things overclassified, they start to get sloppy, right? They see something that has all these things on it, top secret, most classified thing in the world. And it's, did Joe Biden have vanilla ice cream? And they say, well, this is ridiculous. And over a period of time, some of that respect eats away. But in any event, we've got a very strange situation. I'm not sure this has ever happened in the history of our republic. We have the President of the United States, the former President of the United States, and an announced candidate for president. That's one man, by the way, Donald Trump, who are under investigation for the same alleged crime. Slightly different set of circumstances. One side would argue that Trump's facts, if true, both of them are innocent until proven guilty, right? That Trump's facts are worse. Others would argue that Biden's facts are worse. It matters. There's no question it matters. Honestly, I think it only matters if either one of them leads into a malicious motivation or something that has happened that because of it that is damaging to the United States, which you're going to have to take responsibility for, even if you didn't do it intentionally. So far, we haven't seen that, right? Now, in the case of Trump, we're probably pretty sure of that, because whether his situation was worse or better, it's much more self-contained. First of all, it's been a very short period of time relative to Biden. Biden's documents have been out there for 6 years. Trump's, about 2 years, a little less than 2 years, and they haven't been out there. They've been in one place. Biden's documents, we have no chain of custody. We don't know where they were. We know where they were found, but we don't know where they came from. We know they came from the White House. But where were they for the last 6 years? Were they where we found them? Or where they found them? Where his lawyers found them? Are they telling us the truth about it? They're his lawyers. The FBI didn't seize these. They didn't take any pictures of it. Took a lot of pictures of Trump. So we start off with, once again, an extraordinarily shocking application of the double standard, which is too mild a description to convey how, in the area of the application of the criminal law, when you have a double standard, you have destroyed your system of justice. You've crushed it. If one person is held accountable for a crime, and the other person, because of their political differences, isn't. If your political philosophy entitles you to exemption from the criminal law, or your political philosophy entitles you to extraordinary pursuit by the criminal authorities, possibly for things you didn't do, like the Russian collusion, or possibly for things that are exaggerated into criminal matters that generally are not considered that way. For example, the failure to file as a foreign agent, which maybe it should have been considered a crime for years, but it wasn't. So that really just happened for political purposes. Or you could make the argument they're doing that to Trump right now. Trump and Biden, although the facts, on the face are very similar, there's a big difference in the legal implication of the two. And it's important for you to know this, because it's important to show you the destruction the Bidenistas have brought to our system of justice. It's really on its last legs. President Trump has these documents under the Presidential Records Act. It's a law passed by Congress in the 1970s. And you're going to understand some of the confusion here in a minute when I explain this to you. Before that, the papers in the White House were the property of the President of the United States. And then when the president left, he was entitled to take them all. And the government, of course, wanted copies of them also for the archives. So the government would negotiate with the president, and the president would, if he wanted to, make them available to the government, or if he didn't want to, not. And then if you wanted all the papers, you could theoretically get them at the president's library, or maybe not, if the president didn't want to publish a particular paper. Watergate brought about the change. And it was basically to change the balance here. So now the law is the papers ultimately are the property of the United States. And that is in the person of the archivist of the United States, the man who is appointed to run the United States archives that keeps the Declaration of Independence on down. Okay. But the president gets a chance to review them because, first of all, he can take out of his papers purely personal papers, like a love letter from his wife or a love letter to his wife, like Ronald Reagan had so many in that. Probably one of the most beautiful books that that you should just read. I mean, it's just a beautiful book. It's almost a book of poems. And it gives you an idea of how underestimated he was as a writer, because he has a beautiful ability with the language. But in any event, papers like that could be left there or taken out at the president's discretion. The archivist has to approve it. So you show. And of course, the president doesn't do this. People working with the president do this. Maybe they'll go to the president on certain things where a difficult call, like, Mr. President, do you consider this a personal or, well, I consider that personal. Do you want to keep it, just for yourself? Yes, I do. Or, yeah, I consider it personal, but I don't really care if it's in the library or whatever. So then they go back and they show it to the archivist and they say, well, the president thinks these are both personal papers, but the president thinks this one should be kept for him, just for him and his wife and his family, and this one should be made public. But he thinks both of them are personal. The archivist could look at it and say, I don't agree. He makes the final decision. Or he can say, I do agree, and he makes the decision, and the president gets the paper back. Now they say, well, the president's had this for a long time, and he's been an objection, and he's been obstructive. No, he hasn't. Obstruction of justice means destroying things. Nothing's destroyed. Nothing's gone. Nothing was gone for a minute. The guy who obstructed was Biden. Oh, well, they say Biden, immediately brought them immediately. They were gone effectively for 6 years, my friends. That's not obstruction. In Trump's case, they were never gone. So think of it this way. Let's say one of those documents was important, right? And the president said, I need to see such and such. I need to see the history of this negotiation. I need to see the memo of the conversation with Zelensky. And, well, if it were Trump, if it wasn't there, the archivist would call the president and the president would have to produce it immediately. They have effective control of it even while it's there, which is why they went down there, examined them, were satisfied with the conditions of security, and added some. They never had the opportunity to do that with Biden because they were gone. They were effectively stolen. Now, I'm not saying he did it deliberately, but it didn't matter if they were stolen or not. The federal government couldn't put their hands on it. For 6 years, they were floating around. We don't know where. In Trump's case, we know where. We can contain the damage. We can find out, who got to see it and who didn't. So they're not the same. They're not the same. And in terms of determining the criminal liability here, it's the easiest to figure out. First of all, is there any criminal liability for Trump at all? He was the president. He was operating under the Presidential Records Act. The Presidential Records Act has no criminal penalty. You've got to go find one in the Federal Records Act. Congress doesn't say the Federal Records Act applies. We generally construe criminal statutes strictly, and we don't go around creating penalties that Congress hasn't made explicit. I don't know. It's Donald Trump. Probably the rule changes. Aha. First major problem with our republic today. It's Donald Trump and the rule changes. Wow. That's a major blow to our democracy, to our republic, to our system of laws. What a blow that a certain president gets treated differently. And you can't argue that he hasn't. You can't, unless you're a fool. You can't say that he hasn't been treated horribly. What president ever had a frame-up done? It's a proven, established, without any question, Hillary Clinton paid over $1 million to create a crime that could be pinned on Donald Trump so that she could be president and then later take him out of the presidency. And a number of members of her party, some of them governing right now, participated in that conspiracy to defraud the United States. Like a coup. Take him out on false information. Russian collusion. Or make sure he doesn't get elected by suppressing overwhelming evidence, clear, unequivocal evidence of Joe Biden taking well over $40 or $50 million in bribes over 30 years with documents, recordings, pictures, and his son's clear statements of giving him vast amounts of money, which they don't even show you today. They still don't show you the critical documents. You still don't know how clear that hard drive is. They take the key texts, they don't repeat them, and they bury them. But in any event, this is now yet another illustration of the double standard. And there are so many ways it could be illustrated. I'm going to do it just one way. But before I do, I want to remind you that there's something going on in this country right now where the Constitution has been suspended with regard to Donald Trump, those who support him, and to some extent, people described as MAGA or people described as conservative Republicans. And what's that going on? What's going on is our rights have been taken away. Certainly mine have. Biden's haven't been searched. I have. For no reason. They searched me. They said they had probable cause that I committed a crime. And then a year and a half, 2 years later, they write to the grand jury, there's no probable cause of a crime. What happened? Did it float away? They won't show me the affidavit. They won't show me the affidavit. They won't show you a lot of things. So it isn't just Donald Trump, it's all of us. We are being pursued as if we were in a different kind of country, in a fascist country, if we're Republicans, particularly if we support Trump or are particularly conservative. Well, we got to stick together. We got to stick together. We have got to organize. We can't make a mistake. We can't get fooled this time. When we go into the election booth in 24, we should just assume that the New York Times and all of the rest of them are hiding all kinds of information, because for twice in a row now they've done it. And they did it with Hillary too. Covering up the hard drive was probably the biggest fraud in the history of American elections. And it brought us our biggest crook in the White House. And look the damage he's done. And look how he's corrupted the government from. I mean, there is no Justice Department. There is no FBI. The FBI is the state police. The Justice Department are the state prosecutors. So we got to stick together. So you all have cell phones and iPads and pads and computers, and boy, you need internet service, and we all do. Why don't you go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy and see what they can do for you. First of all, you'll be doing business with a company that is Christian and conservative and has been in the fight with us for a long time, in the fight for preserving life, in the fight for preserving our ability to defend ourselves, in the fight for preserving our ability to keep our homes secure against unreasonable searches and seizures, in the fight to preserve our right to counsel. I mean, Trump is the only guy in America whose lawyers' offices get searched. You're going to have it happen to you if they don't agree with your philosophy. Well, Patriot Mobile has been in that fight because they take their time and their money and they put it into that cause because they believe in it. That's the kind of company to support, not the ones that are basically owned by China. So go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy. They'll be very sensitive to the fact that this is an inflation period and they got to try to make a nice price for it. You'll get a discount if you do /Rudy. You not only get a discount, you'll get free installation if you do that. And give them a try. Help the cause. Okay. I will be back in just a minute. Thank you for returning. So, I think we've made it about as clear as we can that there's a double standard. But let's now put these two things together, because there's an unresolved issue here that will determine whether this is criminal or not. And I just want to state it up front. I don't have an answer to it right now, and you don't. But we got to keep this open before everybody decides, well, let's close both cases down. You could close the Trump case down like that. I'm not sure there is a case. I would argue, I think very credibly, that no criminal statute applies to his conduct. Tough luck. I mean, you don't get to make one up now. Presidential Records Act determines what the president does, and the Congress didn't apply a criminal penalty. And where do we come off of putting one in? Congress wants to do it, go pass a new law. That's how our government works, as a government of laws, not as a government of Democrat dictators who dictate different laws for them and for us. That's not even strict construction of the Presidential Records Act. That's a fair and honest construction of it. And you can drop the criminal case against Trump also because he can declassify. Biden can't. He said he declassified these, as other presidents have. He can declassify and take them home. Biden can't do that. Biden's like me when I had classified documents. Man, I was frightened that I'd by mistake take them home. He's not frightened of anything because nobody's going to prosecute him. My God, the guy's committed so many crimes, 50, 60, 70. Not only that, there's an open record of them. Nobody's even given him a subpoena, much less searched him. But here's the issue with Biden. If this is it, if this is him taking these documents out with a reservation for looking at the documents to find out how serious it is, let's assume they're not. They're serious, but not that serious. And this was a mistake, then this is not a case for criminal prosecution. To get to the criminal prosecution, we have to find, I believe, either a malicious motive, a motive to share it with the Chinese, share it with Ukraine, sell it, give it to his son because his son needed it, or someone actually, because of his gross negligence, someone got to see these and was able to use it for a damaging purpose to the country, in which case he should be impeached and prosecuted, even if he took them out by mistake, because it is quite clear that technically he could be prosecuted because his conduct amounts to gross negligence. Trump doesn't. Trump acted under the statute in a way that you could interpret the statute, and the documents were always available, and they weren't under a situation of almost being completely open to the public. That alone, there he is with his car. The documents are in the garage. Now, I think those are the documents. If they are, we're talking about gross negligence. But if they're in a drawer in the garage, that's gross negligence also. In any event, he could be prosecuted under the interpretation that you don't need knowledge and intent. Reckless disregard is enough. I do not think people should be prosecuted usually for reckless disregard, unless a terrible thing happened that maybe you didn't anticipate directly, but could be anticipated based on your gross negligence. I know that's somewhat complicated, so let me put it this way. If this is the end of it and nothing bad happened as a result of this, or that we can prove anything bad happened as a result of this, he had no bad motive, and it didn't end up in the hands of anyone that would use it for a bad purpose, then I think no prosecution, no impeachment. And in the case of Trump, no prosecution, because it's not clear the statute even applies to him. And in any event, there's no evidence of gross negligence. Also, you can't possibly prosecute Trump and not prosecute Biden? I mean, you can't. Will they? Has it gone that? I mean, we're finished if we do that. I think we're pretty much finished anyway with a justice system that means anything. But you do that, and now here's the problem. You can't prosecute Biden. Now, the memo in the Justice Department says you can't prosecute a sitting president. So if you were going to do it, you'd have to do it this way. You'd have to indict him now and try him after he leaves the White House. That's one way to do it. Probably that could violate the memo, maybe, or it might be unconstitutional. Might be. Then you'd get a waiver of the statute of limitations and indict him when he left the White House, when he's indictable for these offenses, if you were going to prosecute him for it. And I said, the only reason to do that is if he deliberately took them for a malicious purpose, or based on his having taken them and being grossly negligent with them, they were used or they were taken by, let's say, bad people. Then you should follow the rule of, well, really what should be able to impeach him and prosecute. The Democratic Senate isn't going to impeach him. I mean, if he handed the documents to Zelensky and Zelensky gave him $100 million in return, or he handed the documents to Putin and Putin gave him $100 million in return. After all, he got big money from both countries. However, we can't let it go for two reasons. We can't let it go because we don't know if Biden didn't take these for malicious purposes. And then most importantly, we have no sense of how this has damaged our national security because we have no sense of what happened to these things. And the fact that the FBI didn't search screams out as to how corrupt they are. I mean, okay, they want to fix the case for Biden. They've got to search to protect our national security. We need to know where these documents have been, who has seen them. Are there more? Now, do we need to know that in order to determine whether Biden went beyond just being grossly negligent? Yes, of course we do. Are they going to do that? Of course they aren't. They didn't prosecute Hillary for destroying 33,000 documents. They're crooked. Get it? The top of the FBI is crooked. The Attorney General is crooked. But now let's put that all aside. They've got to investigate to protect the national security of the United States. These documents were missing for 6 years. We do not know who saw them, who got them, who used them, and we have circumstantial evidence that they could have been in the hands of our enemies, and I'll tell you why. He's one of the few presidents, maybe the only president, that ever got millions and millions of dollars from our biggest enemy. I don't remember Eisenhower or Kennedy or Johnson or Nixon or Carter or Reagan or Bush getting millions from the Soviet Union. Documented, no presumption of innocence because the documents are there. They got at least $31 million from Red China. They were in business with the Chinese government and with Chinese communists. And the documents relate to China and Ukraine. Is that a coincidence? The two countries where they illegally got millions and the documents relate to both of those countries? Could be a coincidence. You don't investigate, you should check into jail. Give up your badge and check into jail because you're a disgrace to the FBI. In fact, any of you people who are going along with this, don't give me the Nazi prison guard bull. You know what your organization is doing. We're at the point where If you don't know what your organization is doing, you're too stupid to do your job. What the FBI has done to the integrity of the justice system in this country is unforgivable, the top of the FBI. What this attorney general has done is even more unforgivable. Meanwhile, nobody looks at his son-in-law out there making a bundle, teaching children about questioning their gender. That's the business he's in. You were wondering why he's so crazy on the notion of parents being terrorists, huh? If they're worried about their children and how they're being treated in the public schools. Look, you want a rule of thumb? This whole administration is about money. And it sure isn't about the best interests of the United States. So I am, as one singular citizen, and probably the person who was the most successful prosecutor alive right now, I'm going to demand that there's a search as an American citizen. I'm going to demand a thorough search of all of the Biden residences and businesses to find out the answer to where have these documents been and who has had access to them, and where are the other documents, because I have never heard of letting the defense lawyers do the search. Do you just want to agree with me that you're corrupt? Because you just did by doing that. Are you crazy? This would be like when the FBI showed up at my door early in the morning to search an innocent man and to ransack the office of a lawyer. As I said, only Trump's lawyers have that happen. So it would be like my saying, I tell you what, I'm going to call my lawyer, Bob Costello. He's going to get a couple other lawyers. They're going to come over, search, and let you know what we found. And then they would call up and the attorney general would say, yeah, that's fine. That's okay. We're going to leave. Don't take your time, too. No big rush. And if you don't find everything, we don't really care. Or when they showed up at Mar-a-Lago, right? Suppose Christina Bobb, who was the lawyer who rushed there, suppose she said, gentlemen, no need for you on this warm day. After all, you took forever to get here. You took the weekend off before you executed the warrant. I see it says exigent, but you don't really mean that, because if it was exigent, you wouldn't have taken the weekend off. But in any event, actually, you took four or 5 weeks to get it. So obviously you don't mean exigent. So I tell you what, I'm going to call up his chief lawyer. We're going to have a bunch of people come down here, a bunch of his lawyers. They're going to search all of Mar-a-Lago. We're going to search the whole place. And then we're going to give you the documents. That's what happened for Biden. Even though in the case of Trump, they had just looked at those documents a few months before. They knew they were there. In the case of Biden, they were gone for 6 years. That's a long time for classified documents to be in the hands of a guy who has corrupt relationships with China, Ukraine, Russia. Oh, they're all $1 million contributors of bribes to him when he was vice president and senator. This is a 30-year history of bribery described by his son. And I'm going to put the text up right now because you can't see this text enough because they try to hide it. You know, all this stuff about how, did Joe get any money? And just read that. This is at about the same time as all this is happening. This is around Christmas time, 2018. This is a text from Joe to his daughter. And you see what it says. It says that he's been taking care of the expenses of his family for 30 years, and he still has to give half his income to his dad. Now, why does he give half his income to his dad? Because he is the bag man, the conduit for the bribery money. It really isn't his money. He gets to keep some of it for his efforts. But like the usual arrangement with a bag man, the bulk of it goes to it. Now, you want some proof that has just come out of that? He was paying a $50,000 rent for this house that the documents were found in. $50,000 rent for a house that he bought? That's how he laundered the money to Joe. He paid for the daughters, Joe and his wife's daughter's education. Wouldn't Joe pay for the education? No. He just offsets that expense to Hunter because that's a way of laundering a payment of whatever the tuition, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, whatever the education to him. And the rent, that's $50,000 a month. Joe was getting $83,000 a month from Burisma. You go through that thing, which they of course never done. You can corroborate every single, not every single penny of it. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. You can corroborate a lot of it. What you can do is, based on the great work that was done by Peter Schweiker, you can prove the 31 million from China, including a couple of really dramatic ones, like $4 or $5 million payment, where Joe, under that umbrella of Joe gets half of the income, but also with an additional contract here that Joe, this was the big guy contract where Joe got 10% out of the original money. So he got the money directly right away. Didn't have to wait for the racketeering scheme to basically work out its distribution. You know how much this is like the mafia? This is like what we did with the Central States Pension Fund and taking the Teamsters Union and Las Vegas away from the mob. They would collect laundered money every month, and they go around and they deliver the amounts due to all the godfathers, the families. You watch the movie Casino, you get a pretty accurate description of what happened until we cracked it and stopped it. This is what Joe and his uncle and his sister-in-law, and sounds like they were getting other people ready for it. That's what they were over the years. They were bagmen, conduits, following very much the Chinese practice. I think it's called Kwando. Schweiker's book describes it in detail, that where in China, the way they corrupt you is through your relatives, and the relatives pass the money to you. So it's harder to trace. And in the United States, that's particularly useful because only the wife and husband have to file a financial disclosure form. Your son doesn't, your brother doesn't. Now, if you can work out a relationship with them where they take the bribes and then they slip the money to you in buying homes for you, paying for vacations, paying for tuition, paying for repairs on the house, therefore you live the life of a multi-millionaire and spend nothing as Joe did. Well, that's a pretty good arrangement. And unfortunately, it's not just a few American politicians who have done that in what has become a very, very corrupt situation, particularly since the Clintons. So you have to investigate this. It is just too much that these documents relate to China and Ukraine when he got so much money from them. We're entitled to an answer. We're not jerks. We shouldn't be treated like like the pigs in Animal Farm. We want to know what happened to these documents, who touched them, who looked at them, who saw them. And we want you to go find the rest of them that exist. And we want not Biden's lawyers to do it. What do you think we are, stupid? You treat us like we're stupid, don't you, you elite crooks? We want an honest law enforcement agency to do it. Go out to the field offices of the FBI. Ask them to do it. Bet they'd love to put you in jail, you people at headquarters. I'm just guessing. Well, we'll keep on top of this one because I think this is the one that if it doesn't break the back of the double standard, we're finished. If this doesn't break the back of the double standard, we have going to have to admit that we don't have a system of justice in this country. And I don't want to admit that. I will not admit that. I won't let that happen. This is tragic. This is tragic what we've let happen. They have proven to us that they have no concern about the national security of this country. Not just the criminal justice system. They don't care about our national security. We have a right to ask. We have a right to ask these people who can see these crimes up front. And number two, deal with this demented individual every day and never raise the question of whether he has the capacity to be president. We can legitimately ask, what kind of patriots are you? And we know America is not first in your administration. It doesn't even seem to be on the list. Well, we'll be back in a few days, possibly on this again, other subjects, but we'll stay on this. This has got a long way to go. It's got very deep tentacles, and it's really the battle of our times so that we can preserve our form of government and our way of life and not become part of the Soros, Biden, World Economic Forum, one world with no America, because Soros, for example, hates the idea of nationalism, particularly American nationalism. And all these progressives hate nationalism. That's why they kneel and burn the flag and have no respect for our heroes. Or part of the doctrine of communism is to do that. So you stay with us, Rudy Giuliani, CS.com. Rudy Giuliani, CS.com, WABC radio.com, and then 10 to 11 with Dr. Maria on Sundays. One other American we should help. Would you please buy, for my sake, buy some pillows or some blankets or those great slippers from mypillows.com/Rudy. There's a guy's on our side. They've done a pretty good job of trying to destroy his business. We should do a pretty good job of making sure his business succeeds, because he spends a lot of money on our causes. A lot. A very charitable, very good man who's been put through hell by these, well, you know what they are. Go to mypillow.com/Rudy. You get a discount. You help him, you help me, you help yourself, and you help America. God bless America. See you in a few days.